Stories from Black nurse leaders is our episode topic in this special Black History Month edition of the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast. My guest panel comprises members of the network of Black male nurse leaders. They are Dr. Bim Akintade, Dean of East Carolina University College of Nursing, Dr. Michael Cary, Associate Professor at Duke University School of Nursing, Dr. Ernest Grant, Vice Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Duke University School of Nursing, Dr. Michael Jones, Associate Dean for Culture, Engagement, and Professional Development at East Carolina University College of Nursing, and Dr. Derrick Glymph, Associate Clinical Professor at Duke University School of Nursing. You can find the network of Black male nurse leaders on LinkedIn, including information about their upcoming summit at the end of February. So let's get started.
Welcome to the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast. BRG is a global consulting firm that helps organizations in disputes and investigations, corporate finance, and performance improvement and advisory. BRG's healthcare performance improvement practice offers multidisciplinary services to healthcare organizations. We focus on implementation with innovative, independent, and data-driven solutions. In the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast, we discuss improving patient care by advancing nursing leadership. For more information about BRG, please visit thinkbrg.com. Now here's your host, Nick Shimalewski.
Gentlemen of the network of Black male nurse leaders, thank you so much for joining us today. Ernest, welcome back. It's great to have you back for another podcast episode.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Before we do introductions with the other four, I know you've already had the pleasure of introducing yourself on a previous episode. Can you talk a little bit about the network of Black male nurse leaders?
The five of us had some dialogue over emails and Zoom and decided that we needed to get together for lunch and just meet each other face to face. I think it was Veterans Day of 2023 that we met at the Cracker Barrel restaurant in Wilson, North Carolina. And during our conversation, we just got to talking about our leadership experiences and who we were, and realized that there were not that many Black men who were in nursing and in leadership positions. And we got to thinking about how many other Black men within the profession perhaps either may need mentors or mentees. And we talked about our mentors as well. And essentially this is the very short version of how the network of Black male nurse leaders got formed. But again, some of my colleagues will probably go a little bit more into that, the going out on LinkedIn and doing surveys and things like that. But we recognized that there was a need for either young Black men who were entering the nursing profession, who were thinking of entering the nursing profession, or who were already in the nursing profession and moving into leadership positions, but didn't have anyone. When they looked around, they probably just thought, I'm the only one here in this space, when in actuality, there are a few of us that are there. So we banded together to offer our services to those individuals from that perspective.
And so it is Black History Month. I can't think of a better group of individuals to have as guests on this podcast than the network of Black male nurse leaders. Why don't we start by getting to know the rest of our panel?
My name is Bim Akintade, Dean and Professor at East Carolina University College of Nursing. I've been in my role now for 3 years and going into my 4th year. And just very briefly, as my name suggests, both my parents are Nigerian. I grew up in Nigeria, came to the States when I was 19. I have a slightly different background from the rest of my awesome colleagues here. But nonetheless, got into nursing in a relatively peculiar manner. My parents wanted me to be either a physician or a lawyer or an engineer, and that's common among African households. And I thought I would become a nurse first and then make my way to medical school. And I'm sure that story is common among several men in nursing too. It didn't take long for me to realize that one of the most important decisions I made professionally was becoming a nurse. And the second most important decision I made was completing my doctoral degree. I completed my PhD at University of Maryland. Came into nursing traditionally. I'm also an acute care nurse practitioner. My specialty is trauma and cardiac surgery. Spent several years in that space. Asked lots of questions. I wanted to understand how policy was made, and I wanted to advocate not only for myself, but for other providers. And I was encouraged to go back to school And so I completed an MBA and an MHA, and I wanted to be in the healthcare administrative space. You did mention earlier that this is geared towards those in the C-suite. That was my goal originally. And I got a scholarship for my PhD, and I was asked to teach for a year. And I recognize that there are just so many pathways to supporting individuals in the nursing profession, and academia was another opportunity for me. I was a faculty member at University of Maryland, program director for about 7 years in the acute care NP clinical nurse specialist program, served as an associate dean there, and then came to Greenville, North Carolina to serve as dean.
My name is Derrick Glymph. I'm an associate professor, a clinical education coordinator, assistant director for the nurse anesthesia program. I'm a CRNA by occupation. My introduction into nursing started with the military. I started off had no idea what I wanted to do. And I always tell this story. My dad would not sign the paperwork. I graduated from high school at 17, and I saw a number of different military tasks and a couple things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a military police officer. I wanted to be a water purifier. He was like, no, he said, the war could break out any moment. And finally, I saw this diagram of a person in a white uniform. And I said, oh man, I want to do that. And that turned out to be an LPN, a 91 Charlie with the military. I just finished a 35-year career as a colonel in the Army Reserves. Again, I progressed from an LPN, associate's degree, RN, to a BSN, finished my master's in nurse anesthesia, went to Afghanistan, decided I wanted to go back to school to get my clinical doctorate. And then I went into education. I've been in education for 14 years. I was formerly in Florida International University. I started off in education, became a program director for a couple years. And then I went and finished my PhD in nursing at University of South Florida and got entertained and recruited to come up to Duke. So I've been at Duke for about 2.5 years and just enjoy mentorship and the growth of people.
Congratulations and thank you for your service. Greatly appreciated. Michael Cary. We have two Michaels. Michael Cary.
I'm Michael Cary. I'm an associate professor, a tenured associate professor at the Duke University School of Nursing. I'm the first African-American nurse tenured at the University School of Nursing. And my primary responsibility is that of engaging in large research studies that leverage AI to investigate and address health disparities in older adult populations. I'm also the faculty lead for our AI initiative in the school that we call HUMANE, which stands for Human-Centered Use of Multidisciplinary AI for Next Generation Education. My journey into nursing started many years ago. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in health services administration and the second one in nursing. Years ago, when I graduated from my first undergrad degree in health services administration, I worked at a insurance company for 2 years. And unfortunately, the insurance company was not performing well with respect to meeting its profit metrics. And they decided to lay off several individuals and close our regional office. It was around that time that I was very interested in understanding what next steps might be for me. And it just so happened my immediate supervisor had been a nurse for 10 years before going back to get his MBA and then going into health insurance. He was extremely knowledgeable about healthcare, and I would ask him questions all the time, like, how do you know so much about healthcare? And he would say, it's because I was a nurse for 10 years. And he really encouraged me to consider going to nursing school. And he recommended that the combination of my health services administration background with clinical competency gained in nursing school would have really helped to propel me in my career. And it did. And so I went back to nursing school to get my second bachelor's in nursing at the University of Virginia. And it was there that I was really heavily influenced by the first Black nurse that I've ever met. His name was Courtney Leiter. And Courtney was the chair of our acute care department. And he was very instrumental in planting those seeds and me going to graduate school and eventually going to get my PhD in nursing. After I finished my PhD in nursing, I was fortunate enough to get a research position at the Duke University School of Nursing. I've been there for the last 10 years and everything's been going well.
And Michael Jones.
My story actually began through my grandmother and a guidance counselor in Lee County, Mississippi. So I moved here to North Carolina from Mississippi about 2 years ago to East Carolina University. So I serve as the Associate Dean for Engagement and Professional Development. I also serve as Executive Director for Advancement, and I'm a Clinical Associate Professor. So I want to take your mind back about 30 years ago. I was in Lee County, Mississippi, and what they had at that time was vocational technical center. So this is where they would train us to do hands-on skills. And because my dad was a mechanic, that's what I was wanting to do. And I was very inquisitive at that time. So I built a good relationship with Miss Pam Peoples there, who was the guidance counselor. And she talked about other options that were available to me. Nursing was one of the two, and teaching was another. And how those actually came about was that she gave me an assessment. And the report said that I could either be a teacher or I could be a nurse. At that time, nursing was, especially in my family, it was not something that men did. And at that time, to be quite honest with you, I didn't really know any male nurses. And also, I think another motivation was my grandmother. So my grandmother was a very strong presence in my life, very influential in my life. She always wanted me to be a doctor, and grew up very poor there. And I knew going to medical school was out of the questions. And I said, I'll give nursing a try. And that was my first and only major that I had. So it took me a little bit longer to get out of nursing school. So I started with an associate degree. I finished that in the year 2000. I actually failed my very first semester of nursing school. Fast forward, I've done a brief stint as a clinical nurse, started out as an orthopedic surgery nurse. Then I did some spinal cord injury nurse, and I got burned out about 5 years in full-time nursing. So I left bedside after about 5 years, and I've actually served more on the healthcare administration side, more of my career than I have at the bedside. And because of that, I have continued to further educate myself. I have a business degree. I have a Master of Science in Nursing, a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And ultimately, I ended up with a PhD in nursing, fast forward. So what actually brought me into the role that I'm in now, and also in academia, is that I was working for a health insurance company, overseeing Medicaid case management. And my next job in an health insurance company was I was overseeing claims, IT, health plan operations. That job didn't quite work out. We decided that we would part ways. And at that time, COVID hit. So this was in 2020, COVID hit. And thankfully, I was wrapping up my PhD at Hampton University. So once I finished with my PhD, I decided to leave Mississippi altogether. And so I worked in Atlanta, Georgia, at a school called Brenau University. So I went there and started in an entry-level Master of Science in Nursing program that was actually designed for individuals who have a bachelor's degree in another discipline. For example, if there's a teacher who wanted to become a nurse, so we had an accelerated program. So I was very successful with that program. Of the three cohorts that I oversaw there, two had 100% NCLEX pass rate. The other had 92% NCLEX pass rate. And because of that work, I developed a love for academia, and that's where I've stayed since 2020. And make a long story short, was linked up with Dr. Bim Akintade via LinkedIn. I was actually applying for another position, and I was just getting his input about that position. He had a position open here, so I applied for that position. And I have been here for about 2 years now, and I enjoy the work that I do here at East Carolina University.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great introductions. So our topic today is stories from Black nurse leaders, and we've all gotten your story of how you've gotten into the profession. I'd love to open this up as a panel discussion right now, focusing really on experiences and challenges. If you could talk about what some of the biggest obstacles that you faced in your path of leadership, and how you have experienced or encountered racial bias or systemic barriers in your nursing career, and what has been the process that you've used to navigate them. So I'm going to open that up as a broad discussion and maybe start with Ernest just as a starting point, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Two things come to mind immediately. One, when I first got out of nursing school, the fact that you are, and I'm the oldest of all the guys who are here. So I started back in nursing back in the mid 70s. and being challenged, if you will, as far as having your education questioned. What school did you go to? That would indicate for someone as to whether or not they felt that if you graduated from a certain school, yeah, you're going to be a good nurse. If you went to a school that they thought was inferior, then that would mean that they would give you a rough time. And this is either be a patient or your nurse colleagues as well. And so you have to win them over. One of the things I'm sure all of my colleagues will say is that, first of all, being Black and being a male in a female dominated profession, you are under the microscope even more so. Everything that you do is probably either going to be questioned or looked at or criticized. And so you just have to be aware of that and prove yourself over and over again that I do belong in this setting, be it at the bedside, be it in administrative position or other leadership positions. I think the other time for me was during my term as president of ANA. Again, being the first male president of ANA, not only and only the third African American president of ANA. Again, some of the same things, your leadership skills. And of course, I was president during a very challenging time. COVID was going on, so people were really questioning under my leadership, was the association doing the right thing as far as educating nurses, educating the public, meeting with members of Congress and other members of the healthcare team to ensure that the messages was getting out there to the public. So I think I more than proved myself worthy of doing that, but that's just a couple of examples of stumbling blocks that I had to encounter.
This is Michael Jones. Because of the environment that I grew up in, I think even now, 25 years into my nursing career, sometimes I'm my own barrier. And what I mean by that, it's sometimes you doubt yourself. Sometimes imposter syndrome is alive and well, even in the work that I do, where I actually question whether I deserve to be where I am now. And I can give you some examples. I talked about not knowing any male nurses when I grew up. I was not really exposed to many professional men as we would define them today. I was exposed to some very hardworking men, some very influential men, but no doctors, lawyers, nurses, or anything like that. So I really did not have anything what we would call as professional to use as a template. So I had to kind of learn as I've gone. And because of the background that I've had, and because of I think some of the racism that is very much so alive in Mississippi, I sometimes question myself if when I'm trying to make certain decisions, my ability sometimes to be in certain circles and have that level of confidence within myself that kind of projects me as a strong leader. I think I constantly have to deal with that. So I'll go back to my opening statement. I am my own barrier sometimes, and I think my personal experiences and lived experiences help to perpetuate that.
This is Derrick Glymph. I can remember instances. Number one, there's not many Black male CRNAs out there. But I remember when I was when I was applying for CRNA school, my initial being in the military, I wanted to go to the Uniformed Service University. And I looked at, they had to take the GRE, and I took it really fast, and I did horrible on it. The director of the Uniformed Service program told me, I've never seen a GRE score this low. You cannot possibly be going to anesthesia school. And it's something about me. If you ever tell me I can't do something, it's going to make me want to do it even more. And I, in turn, took the GRE, did really well on it, went to the #1 school of anesthesia, which is VCU. They were the #1 for 10 years. And later on, I saw that gentleman and I said, hey, you remember me? I said, I'm the guy that you said would never make it. And he said, I said, I just want to let you know I was successful. I finished #1 in my class. And I said, don't ever tell anybody that they can't do it. And that just stuck with me. And I make sure I tell anybody that is looking to go into anesthesia school, don't ever, when somebody says you can't do it, you can do it. And so that story has stuck with me even now.
This is Michael Cary, and I sit and think and listen to my colleagues. This is the power of our group, is the consistent theme of resilience. All of us have encountered a number of different barriers along the way, and we've all overcome those barriers. And we think that's so powerful to share those stories of achievement with other young men who are trying and experiencing similar things. I have more barriers than I can actually remember and more barriers than I can actually share during our segment today. But some of the ones that I think that have been consistent has been just negative comments based on a very limited understanding of who I am and what I bring. And I've had experiences in college and in my professional work as a full-time faculty member. Couple of stories. I remember when I applied for the PhD program, and this person is no longer there, but I remember having a conversation, and this person said flat out, "I don't really think you'll be successful here, and you need to reconsider applying." And this is someone I'm interviewing with during the day of the program. And much like Derrick, I guess I'm pretty hard-headed because when someone says that I can't do something, I usually double down or triple down. And I got into that program and I graduated from that program and I received a Distinguished Research Award from that program. It wasn't too long after that I got an offer to be a faculty member at Duke University. And I'm so excited to be at such a strong academic institution. And I'm engaged in research projects. And I remember one colleague that's no longer at Duke now who made it a point to say, "Hey, when we're in research meetings, I don't want you questioning my decisions. You don't have the authority to question my decisions. And where do you come off making recommendations?" A lot of these things, they're hurtful and they really sting. Those are examples of the sting of racism that is in some way or another have impacted us all. But I think in a lot of ways, we found opportunities and strength in one another to overcome obstacles like that. And again, I think that's the value of the network that we've created. We're trying to share that with other young men.
Ms. Bim Akintade, ditto to what everyone else has said already. Our pathways are not very different from one another. For me, my biggest challenge or obstacle I faced along my journey was a lack of mentorship. The number of Black men in nursing in the United States today is less than 1% of the nursing population. It's probably about 0.65, somewhere thereabout, which means in my experience, I was the only Black male nursing student in my BSN cohort, in my master's cohort, and also in my PhD cohort. From a cultural perspective, from just an understanding of what my challenges were, I personally didn't feel supported. Even if the resources were available, I didn't feel supported. In parallel, just that lack of mentorship, I didn't have anyone that I could speak with. I wanted to be a physician, but I went the nursing route. That in of itself meant I didn't have anyone I could talk to say, "This is my goal. How do I get there?" I'm glad I went through this path because it's served as a foundation for everything I've accomplished in my career and for what else I'm going to do for the rest of my career. But just recognizing that I've experienced the majority of my career until I got to a place where I have this network of supporters where we can share ideas. I can learn perspectives from another Black man who is experiencing something similar. Let me also be very quick to share that I got a lot of support through my career. In addition to some of those challenges, like we say, it takes a community to raise a child. A lot of people who didn't look like me invested in my career and helped me get to this point. But I also recognize those gaps that were missing. I'll give you a very quick example in my OB rotation. A lot of the patients would single me out and ask that I exit the room. And I wouldn't even call that discrimination. They just didn't feel comfortable with a Black male student in the room with them, especially as a nurse. That happened to me about 3 different times. And at some point, it does make you question, am I in the right profession? Is this profession really for men if I'm being asked to exit the room? And now over time, obviously, what I enjoy the most about my job, as multifaceted as my role, is mentorship. Just the opportunity to sit and interact with individuals, share my experiences, make connections, serve as a sponsor, as a coach where appropriate, but just using my lived experiences, both positive and negative, to ensure that other people have better experiences along the way.
How do you lead with authenticity in spaces where you might be, to your point, Bim, the only one? And how do you advocate for equity and representation in nursing leadership today? What structural or policy changes do you believe are still needed to support Black nurses in leadership?
Since you started with my name and a question, I'm going to jump right in.
Hey, go right ahead.
How do you lead with authenticity in spaces where you might be the only one? Dr. Michael Jones said something about imposter syndrome earlier, and I think we've all experienced that. We're all very accomplished, and we've invested a lot in ourselves, both personally and professionally. Yet, when you show up to a space and you're the only one, or others around the table don't look like you, psychologically, it has a potential to impact you. For me, I have some foundational principles that have helped me in my life. And as I've gotten older, I've put in some additional effort in that space. One, whatever's worth doing is worth doing well. I show up as either the most prepared or one of the most prepared people in every room I show up to. Every meeting I go to, every gathering, every shared space where opinions matter or decisions are made, I do my homework. And it's usually my job to either clarify or provide new information. So I really do put in a lot of effort in preparing. I think that helps me personally. The second one is it used to be the golden rule where you treat everyone the way you would like to be treated. And now it's the platinum rule. You treat people the way they would like to be treated. Just learning from my experiences, I'm not bitter. I'm very even keel, probably more bubbly and chipper most of the time. I like meeting people where they are, recognizing that for the majority of my life, people did not meet me where I was. So I pay that forward. And the last thing, and a lot of us shared this. Someone said this to me after my doctoral degree during my PhD or after my PhD graduation. He said, the reward for hard work is more hard work. I expect to work hard. There are no shortcuts to success. Put in time and effort up front, during and after. And so that way I never feel like I'm working too hard or someone's taking advantage or no, because I expect excellence in whatever I do. And so those principles have preceded me in every room I've walked into, and that helps me be my authentic self. If I disagree with a premise, with a policy, my hand goes up very quickly. I have put in enough time and effort to be articulate enough to share my position without being biased or offensive. And I've also learned that it's not my job to change other people's minds. We can agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, people know how I feel, policies or decision making, especially when I'm advocating for others. So I think it starts with you. And when you feel comfortable and confident in what you bring to the table, it becomes slightly easier to be authentic.
This is Michael Cary. I'll add to that in that I think over time, I've really grown to appreciate my uniqueness. I appreciate that when I step in the room, I may be the only Black person. I appreciate when I step in the room, I may be the only Black nurse. I appreciate when I step into boardrooms and to larger meetings with hospital system administrators where we're talking about the development of AI tools and the adoption of those AI tools in the practice, that I'm the only Black person there because my voice matters. And many times when you have people of similar groups, there isn't a discussion or a debate. So you don't see things from a different perspective. Another thing that is really rare about me, and some of my colleagues are from rural areas as well, the fact that I'm from a rural area is important, particularly if I'm engaging with other colleagues who are really lockstep and focused on more larger urban medical centers and metropolitan areas. Those things that I find really important now as I engage in national presentations, meetings, the fact that I'm representing, but I'm also giving voice to a group of individuals that aren't normally in the room?
This is Derrick Glymph. For me, the military has given me such a unique perspective of showing up. Even when I try to be late, I can't be late. So I'm always ahead of time, on time, or early. To Ben's point, that preparation is essential. Oftentimes, being the only, and sometimes I don't look at it that way, but I think we bring a unique perspective wherever we're at. When I finished my PhD program, my whole family went. One of my mentors was with them, and she had the best seat. I said, "How did you guys get the best seat?" They said, "She's a general. She just walked in the room like she owned the place." And my kids were shocked. And I say, to have that perspective that no matter what the environment, you had that presence, you had that accountability. And that's the way I aspire to be. No matter what setting you're in, that your voice matters and that you're important. I think that's what this group is all about, to empower Black men to understand that they're not only their unique position, but also the power and presence they have.
This is Michael Jones. And I think for me, my mind goes back to a statement my mom would always make. She still very much so a very strong figure in my life. And she would always tell myself and my siblings, "You represent me." And she would always say, "Whatever you go out and do in the public, always think of the fact that you are representing me." And I think for me, what I have to continue to understand and remember is that when I show up, I represent so many different people who have helped me along the way. I'm also a voice for those individuals who cannot speak for themselves. And I feel like sometimes if we are the only at the table, there is a job that we must do. And I think our failure to do that is what I like to call as professional malpractice within whatever area we're practicing in. And just kind of also think too, when we are at the table or when we have an opportunity to be at the table, even if we don't have an opportunity, we have to create a space to be at the table. And I can give you a physical example just briefly from one of my previous bosses who was also my great mentor for me. So I was attending a meeting one day. There was this large conference room table there. He and I were the only two Black men in the room. I sat on the wall. And so I could see him kind of looking at me when I walked in and sat around the wall. And after the meeting, he and I, we would always have our debriefing. And he was like, "So what's up with you sitting around the wall and not sitting at the table?" And his message to me was, as long as you sit on the wall, will be treated as if you deserve not to be at the table. So now for me, it's important to find a way to sit at the table. And when I'm at the table, I should always contribute something to that discussion. So it's not, and I don't have the choice to go and sit and listen and not really share my viewpoints on a particular issue. So that's the way I've governed myself throughout my 25-year career in nursing as a Black male.
That's such an interesting perspective. Ernest, I believe if you want to close us out for closing perspectives, I will share, Dr. Jones, it makes me think of a dear colleague of mine, Dr. Garrett Chan, who talks about bringing a chair.
Mm-hmm.
Have a chair in the trunk of your car, figuratively or maybe
Literally.
even truly physically, that you just need to bring a chair so that you have a seat at the table. Ernest, you want to close us out with some closing thoughts?
Yeah, so certainly your friend is actually quasi-quoting Shirley Chisholm, who was famous for saying, "If there's no chair at the table, bring your own." And that is certainly true. Part of it in my life as well, I echo everything that my colleagues have said. And again, as I stated earlier, I'm older than these guys. So I can remember in a lot of cases when I was growing up, we were right at the end of segregation, the beginning of the civil rights era. So I can remember being the only one, like in grade school, high school, and even through the beginning of college as well. And so it became, as they said, you represent the community, and you would do a disservice if you did not have your voice heard. Again, just to wrap things up, that's what the network of Black male nurse leaders is all about, is to continue to make sure that our voices are heard and that we're also speaking for those communities that we represent, because they have reared us and they are expecting great things out of us. And it's our way of giving back and reaching back and making the pathway a lot easier for those who are coming behind us.
Stories from Black Nurse Leaders has been our episode topic. The network of Black male nurse leaders has been our first panel. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Dr. Michael Jones, Dr. Ernest Grant, Dr. Derrick Glymph, Dr. Michael Cary, Dr. Bim Akintade. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast, which focuses on improving patient care by advancing nursing leadership. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and podcast guest and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, position, or policy of the guest employer, Berkeley Research Group, or their other respective employees and affiliates.